Things. In life, challenges often seem overwhelming, but true strength is born when faith becomes our anchor. Things. Nick Vujicic's journey proves that no matter how great the struggle, faith can transform pain into power and limitations into limitless possibilities. Faith as the foundation of resilience is not just a concept, but a lived reality for those who choose to trust in something greater than themselves when life brings them to their lowest point. When we talk about resilience, we often think of inner strength, determination, and willpower, but what many fail to realize is that without faith, those elements can quickly burn out in the face of relentless adversity. Faith acts like the unseen force that keeps the human spirit unbroken. Even when circumstances scream defeat. It allows a person to look at a storm not as the end, but as an opportunity to discover new ways of surviving and thriving. Nick Vujicic's life is one of the clearest testimonies to this truth. Born without arms and legs, he could have easily been consumed by despair, anger, or hopelessness, but it was faith that gave him the lens to see beyond his physical limitations. It was faith that reminded him that his worth was not tied to what he lacked, but to what he could become. Faith was the anchor that kept his heart from sinking into bitterness. And it was the foundation that made him resilient enough to stand tall without ever standing on legs. Resilience without faith can feel fragile. Like a house built on sand, easily washed away by the waves of life. People who rely only on their own strength may last for a while. But when life throws its most brutal challenges, sheer willpower often crumbles. Faith, however, plants a deeper root inside the human soul. It creates the conviction that there is meaning even in suffering, that hardships are not wasted, and that every trial carries a hidden lesson. This perspective empowers a person to keep moving when everything else says stop. Nick shares how as a young boy he was bullied, mocked, and sometimes pushed into deep depression, even questioning why God would allow him to be born that way. At the lowest point, his faith whispered to him that he was not an accident, that he was made with purpose. That small spark of belief lit a fire that carried him through years of pain and led him to inspire millions. Faith gave him the ability to interpret his hardships not as curses, but as tools shaping him into someone extraordinary. When faith becomes the foundation of resilience, it changes how you interpret obstacles. Instead of saying, this is the end, you begin to say, this is the beginning of something greater. Instead of asking, why me? You start to ask, what for? This shift in perspective is powerful. Because it transforms suffering into strength. Faith teaches you that your current struggle is not the whole story, only a chapter, and that beyond every valley lies another peak. For Nick, the valley of self-doubt and despair was real and deep. But faith kept him moving until he climbed out of it into a life filled with purpose and global influence. He stands before thousands across the world not as a man broken by circumstances, but as a man made resilient because he trusted in something greater than his pain. His story reveals a universal truth. When faith takes root, resilience becomes unshakable. Faith also gives resilience its endurance. Many people start strong but grow weary as battles drag on, and without faith, the weight of struggles often feels unbearable. Faith, however, breathes new strength into weary hearts. It tells you that every step matters, even the slow and painful ones. It reassures you that while you may not see progress today, transformation is happening inside you. For someone like Nick, waking up every day without arms and legs could have been a constant reminder of limitation, but faith turned that reminder into motivation. He began to see himself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a vessel for hope. That conviction made him resilient not just for a season, but for a lifetime, sustaining him through rejection, failures, things, and endless obstacles that would have broken others. Another powerful dimension of faith in resilience is the courage it gives to embrace vulnerability. Things. Many think resilience means never breaking, never crying, never admitting weakness. Things. But real resilience is the ability to be broken and still move forward. Things. Faith teaches you that admitting your weakness does not make you weak. It makes you stronger because you open the door for divine strength to fill the gaps. Things. Nick openly shares his struggles with depression, self-image, and fear not as a sign of defeat, but as proof of his humanity. Yet, things, because his resilience was rooted in faith, those struggles became part of his testimony rather than the end of his story. Things. Faith allowed him to turn vulnerability into a weapon of connection. Things. Inspiring countless people who face their own hidden battles to rise again. Resilience built on faith also creates a ripple effect. Things. It does not stay confined to one person, but spreads to those who witness it. When people see someone who has every reason to give up, but refuses to, things. They find hope for their own struggles. Nick's life is a clear example of this ripple effect. Things. Millions across the globe look at him and realize that if he can face life without limbs and still smile, still dream, still impact the world, things, then surely they can face their own challenges. This is the power of resilience rooted in faith. It multiplies hope. It builds communities of courage. Things, and it breaks chains of despair not only for one person but for countless others. Faith-driven resilience also ignites creativity. Things. When you believe that limitations are not the end, you start finding new ways to navigate them. Nick could not do many things the way others could. Things. But his faith inspired him to adapt, innovate, and discover unique approaches to living. Whether it was learning to swim, type, things, or travel the world as a motivational speaker, his creativity flowed out of his belief that he was not defined by what he lacked. Things. Faith gave him permission to try, to fail, to rise, and to try again, and resilience was the result of that unshakable trust. Things. This truth applies to everyone when faith is present. Things. Resilience does not just endure hardships, but thrives through them by unlocking hidden strengths and abilities that would never have surfaced otherwise. Faith is the foundation of resilience. Is also about hope beyond circumstances. Things. It is about seeing light even when surrounded by darkness. Nick's story shows that resilience is not pretending pain does not exist. Things, but choosing to believe that pain has a purpose. Things. It is about standing firm not because life is easy, but because faith tells you that life is worth it. Every scar, every failure. Things. Every tear becomes a stepping stone instead of a stumbling block when you build your resilience on faith. Things. You stop being crushed by what you go through and start being shaped by it. This transformation is not temporary. It rewires the way you see life. Things. And it equips you with an inner power that cannot be shaken by external events. This is why Nick Vujicic, things, despite being born into what many would call a hopeless situation, has become one of the strongest voices of hope in the world. Things. His resilience is not natural. It is supernatural, birthed from faith that gave him the courage to live fully, love deeply. Things. And never quit no matter the odds. Turning pain into purpose is one of the most transformative journeys a human being can ever undertake. Things. And it is at the very core of why certain individuals rise above their struggles to inspire millions. Pain by itself can feel destructive. Things. Isolating and unbearable. It can make people question their worth, their direction, and even their existence. Yet, things. When pain is not suppressed, but instead embraced, understood, and channeled, it becomes the raw material out of which purpose is forged. Things. Pain shapes perspective, sharpens empathy, and awakens a deeper mission in life. Nick Vujicic embodies this truth completely. Born without limbs, things. He could have allowed pain to dominate his life, to make him bitter, resentful, and broken. Instead, things. He chose to let that pain push him toward a higher calling. Things. He took what could have been the greatest tragedy of his life and transformed it into a platform of inspiration for millions across the globe. Things. His pain became not just his personal struggle, but the very purpose that gave meaning to his existence. The first step in turning pain into purpose often begins with acceptance. Things. Many people waste years fighting the reality of their struggles, asking why life had to be so cruel. This constant resistance only deepens the pain. Things, making it impossible to move forward. Nick himself went through such a phase as a child and teenager. He was mocked at school. Things, felt left out in every activity, and sometimes wished his life could just end because the burden seemed too heavy. But in time, things, he discovered that his condition was not a punishment, but a platform. Things. The very thing that caused him to suffer was the thing that would later connect him with millions who were also silently suffering. Things. Accepting pain does not mean enjoying it or resigning to it. It means acknowledging its presence and choosing not to let it imprison you. Things. This mindset of acceptance becomes the gateway through which purpose begins to emerge. Pain also has a unique way of awakening empathy. Things. When you go through hardships, you develop an inner ability to understand others on a deeper level. Things. You no longer look at someone's struggles from a distance. You feel them as if they were your own. This is why some of the most powerful leaders, things, healers, and motivators in the world are people who have gone through great pain. Their words carry weight because they come from lived experience. Things. Nick Vujicic's speeches are powerful not just because he speaks well, but because his audience knows he has lived through isolation, depression, things, and despair. When he tells someone that their life has value, it resonates deeply because he once questioned his own value. Things. Pain prepared him to connect with people's hearts in ways that comfort, privilege, or ease never could. Things. That empathy became part of his purpose to remind others that no matter what they face, things, they are not alone and their lives matter. Another dimension of turning pain into purpose is the discovery of hidden strengths. Things. Struggles often expose abilities and resilience you never knew existed. Nick discovered this as he learned to adapt to life without arms and legs. Things, every task that seemed impossible, brushing his teeth, writing, swimming, typing, forced him to develop determination, creativity, things, and problem-solving skills far beyond what most people ever need to use. Things. This constant process of overcoming limitations gave him a unique strength that went beyond the physical. It was mental, emotional, things, and spiritual strength, and that strength became an essential part of his purpose. Without his pain, things, he might never have discovered the depth of courage he carried. Pain, therefore, is not just a weight, but a training ground, forging character, things, persistence, and faith. Once a person realizes that their struggles are actually equipping them for a greater mission, things, pain no longer feels meaningless but becomes a teacher guiding them toward purpose. Turning pain into purpose also involves transforming personal wounds into platforms of service. Things. Pain is not wasted when it is used to help others. Nick could have kept his story private, hiding his struggles, things, but he realized that vulnerability was the key to impact. By opening up about his pain, he gave others permission to face theirs. Things. He built a life's mission around speaking in schools, prisons, churches, and arenas, telling people that they too could overcome. Things. His pain became the very tool that enabled him to step into countless lives and bring healing. This principle holds true universally. Things. When you decide to use your own story of suffering to uplift others, things, you discover a sense of fulfillment far greater than any comfort or success could bring. Things. Purpose is found not in escaping pain, but in transforming it into a light that guides others through their own darkness. Pain also gives clarity to what truly matters in life. Things. It strips away illusions and distractions, forcing you to confront the deeper questions of meaning, identity, and destiny. Things. Nick's pain led him to realize that life was not about what you have, but about what you give. things. It was not about physical perfection, but about spiritual wholeness. This clarity became the compass for his purpose. Things. He no longer needed arms and legs to live fully because his sense of worth was no longer tied to appearance or ability. Instead, things. It was anchored in the impact he could create, the hope he could spread, and the love he could share. Things. Pain has the power to redirect people away from shallow pursuits and guide them toward deeper, more enduring goals. Things. When embraced with the right perspective, things. It reveals that your true purpose is often hidden within your greatest trials. Another aspect of turning pain into purpose is resilience in the face of rejection. Things. Purpose is not built in comfort, but in the fire of disappointment. Nick faced rejection in school, in relationship, things, and in society's limited expectations of him. Each rejection stung, but it also redirected him closer to his purpose. Things. Instead of allowing rejection to crush him, he used it as fuel to prove that his life had meaning. Things. Rejection became the refining fire that strengthened his resolve and clarified his mission. For anyone seeking to turn pain into purpose, things. Rejection should not be seen as a sign to give up, but as confirmation that the path you are on requires perseverance. Things. Every no you face can be transformed into a deeper yes for the purpose you are meant to live out. Pain can also inspire innovation. Things. When life does not go the way you planned, you are forced to think differently, to innovate, and to create new paths. Things. Nick had to reinvent how he would function in everyday life, but this constant reinvention made him a symbol of adaptability. Things. His life speaks to the idea that no obstacle is absolute if you are willing to approach it with creativity and determination. Things. This innovative mindset became part of his purpose, teaching others that no matter their limitations, there is always a way forward. Things. Pain pushes people out of the comfort zone of familiarity and into the arena of discovery. Things. Where they realize that purpose often lies in doing what has never been done before. Finally, turning pain into purpose creates legacy. Things. When pain is kept private and allowed to fester, it may eventually fade but leaves no impact beyond the individual. But when it is shared, things, transformed and used to inspire, it echoes across generations. Nick's pain turned into purpose. Things has touched millions of lives and will continue to do so long after him. His books, speeches, things, and the lives he has influenced are all part of a legacy built on the foundation of suffering transformed into service. Things. Pain does not have to be the end of the story. It can be the seed that grows into a purpose so much larger than oneself. Every tear shed, things, every battle fought, and every scar carried can become a testimony that uplifts others. Things, ensuring that your struggles are not wasted, but instead planted into the soil of humanity where they bloom into hope for countless others. Breaking limitations with belief is one of the most profound demonstrations of human potential. Things, because it is not the external conditions of life that define what someone can achieve, but the internal convictions that govern their thoughts. Things. Belief is the invisible force that allows people to break chains, overcome obstacles, things, and rise above circumstances that would otherwise keep them trapped. Limitations come in many forms: physical disabilities, financial struggles, things, societal expectations, cultural barriers, or even the quiet voice of doubt within one's own mind. While these barriers may appear immovable, things, history and personal testimony prove that belief has the extraordinary power to dismantle them. Things. Nick Vujicic's life is a living example of this truth. Born without arms and legs, the world expected him to live a life of dependency, smallness, thins, and invisibility. Yet through belief in God, in his worth, things, in his capacity to make an impact, he broke limitations that seemed impossible to overcome. Things. His story demonstrates that belief is not wishful thinking, things, but the catalyst for transformation that rewrites the story of what is possible. Limitations often begin in the mind before they manifest in life. things. A person may not be physically restrained, but if they believe they are incapable, then they will never attempt to go beyond their boundaries. Things. This is why belief is so powerful. It reshapes perception, and perception influences action. Things. Nick could have easily accepted society's label that he was disabled in a way that meant helplessness and despair. Things. But belief challenged that narrative. He chose to believe that his life had value, that he could contribute things, and that he was not defined by what he lacked, but by what he carried inside. This shift in mindset allowed him to see opportunities where others only saw impossibility. By embracing belief, he redefined his limitations, turning them into stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. The moment you choose to believe differently about your circumstances, you open the door to new ways of living. Belief also fuels perseverance. Breaking limitations is rarely a one-time event. It is a process that requires consistent effort in the face of resistance. Every time Nick attempted something new, learning to type with his toes, swimming without limbs, or traveling the world as a speaker, he encountered setbacks. There were moments of failure, ridicule, and frustration. Without belief, those setbacks would have been enough to keep him from trying again. But belief instilled the conviction that even if success did not come immediately, it was still possible. That conviction gave him the resilience to keep trying until breakthroughs came. This principle applies universally. Belief does not erase difficulty, but it provides the strength to endure it until limitations are shattered. Perseverance born from belief transforms barriers into temporary challenges rather than permanent conditions. Courage to rise after every fall is one of the defining traits of individuals who refuse to let setbacks dictate the course of their lives. Falling is inevitable in the human journey. No one escapes failure, disappointment, or heartbreak. What separates those who remain down from those who rise higher is not the absence of failure, but the willingness to stand back up again. No matter how many times life knocks them down. Courage is not a feeling of fearlessness, but a decision to act despite fear, pain, or uncertainty. For someone like Nick Vujicic, who was born without arms and legs, falling was not a metaphor, but a literal reality. As a child, he would fall physically and struggle to get up. Facing not only the challenge of his condition, but the deeper emotional battle of whether life was even worth living. Yet, every time he chose to rise, he demonstrated the principle that failure is never final unless you refuse to get back up. His life embodies the courage required to rise after every fall. Teaching that setbacks are not permanent destinations, but temporary pauses on the way to growth and victory. The act of rising after a fall requires first an acceptance that falling is part of progress. Too often people view failure as a sign that they are inadequate or incapable, when in reality it is proof that they are attempting something challenging and meaningful. Nick himself faced countless failures in his efforts to adapt to daily life. Simple tasks like brushing his teeth, writing, or balancing on his torso were filled with mistakes, slips, and disappointments. Each fall could have reinforced the lie that he was incapable, but instead he reframed those failures as part of the process of learning. Courage was required not just to try again, but to shift his perspective so that every fall became a lesson rather than a verdict. For anyone, the path to greatness demands this same courage to view falling not as a disgrace, but as a stepping stone toward eventual mastery. Another aspect of courage in rising after a fall is resilience in the face of rejection. Rejection can feel even more crushing than failure because it often comes with the sting of judgment from others. Nick experienced rejection from peers who bullied him, from individuals who underestimated him, and from opportunities that seemed closed because of his condition. Each rejection had the potential to push him deeper into despair. things. Yet courage allowed him to continue showing up, to continue believing that his life had value, things, and to continue pursuing his dreams even when others did not recognize his potential, things. Rising after rejection requires courage because it means facing the possibility of being rejected again, yet doing so anyway, things. It is in this cycle of rejection and rising that true resilience is built, and over time, things, rejection loses its power to define a person's worth. A courage also requires vulnerability. To rise after falling is to admit weakness, things, to show scars, and to accept imperfection. Many people avoid rising because they fear being seen in their brokenness. Things. They worry that if they try again and fail, they will confirm the doubts others already have about them. Things. But Nick turned his vulnerability into strength by sharing openly about his depression, his suicidal thoughts, and his sense of inadequacy. Things. He revealed the raw truth of his falls, yet it was precisely this honesty made his eventual rise so powerful. Things. People connected with him because he did not pretend to be invincible. Things. He showed that courage is not about never falling, but about refusing to let the fall define the end of the story. Things. Vulnerability becomes a form of courage that gives others permission to rise as well. Things. Showing that brokenness does not disqualify, but rather prepares one for greater strength. Rising after a fall also demands faith in possibilities unseen. Things. Courage is fueled by the belief that even though the present looks bleak, the future holds something worth striving for. Nick could not see things as a young boy in the depths of depression that he would one day speak in front of thousands, write books, or have a family. Things. What he did have was faith. Faith that his life had purpose, faith that his pain was temporary, and faith that if he kept rising, things, doors would eventually open. That belief gave him the courage to keep trying even when evidence suggested otherwise. Things. For anyone facing repeated setbacks, courage is sustained by hope in something greater than the moment. Things. It is the conviction that every fall can be followed by a rise. Things. And that the future can be different from the present if you do not give up. Another dimension of courage in rising after every fall is the ability to silence the voice of shame. Things. Falling often brings with it a narrative of failure that says, you are not good enough, you will never succeed. Things. You are unworthy. This voice of shame is often louder than the external obstacles people face because it comes from within. Things. Nick struggled with these thoughts intensely in his younger years, feeling unworthy of love, friendship, or success. Things. Courage was required not only to rise physically, but to silence the destructive inner dialogue that told him his falls defined his value. Things. By choosing to replace those lies with truth, that his worth was inherent, that he was created with purpose, things, and that he had something to give, he reclaimed the courage to keep moving forward. Things. Rising after a fall is as much an internal battle as it is an external one. Things. And courage is the weapon that defeats the inner critic that tries to keep you down. Courage to rise after every fall also teaches perseverance as a lifestyle. Things, not a momentary act. Life is not about rising once or twice, but about developing the habit of rising every time. Things. Nick's story is filled with repeated cycles of challenge, fall, and rise. Whether it was learning independence, facing rejection in relationships, things, or navigating the stage as a global speaker, he encountered new difficulties at every level of success. Things. But because he had developed the discipline of rising, each new fall became less intimidating. Courage grew with every step. Things, making him more resilient and more prepared for the next challenge. For anyone seeking to live a meaningful life, the lesson is clear. Things, courage is not built in a single moment, but in the repetition of rising again and again. Things, until resilience becomes second nature. Another powerful outcome of rising after every fall is the inspiration it gives to others. Things. Courage is contagious. When people see someone fall and then rise, they are reminded that they too can get back up. Things. Nick's ability to rise became a symbol of hope for millions. Audiences around the world facing their own falls in the form of financial loss. Things. Broken relationships, illness, or failure find courage by watching him stand on stage and declare that falling is never final. Things. His story demonstrates that courage to rise is not just for personal survival, but for communal encouragement. Things. Every rise plants seeds of hope in others, showing them that their setbacks do not have to be permanent. In this way, courage multiplies its impact far beyond the individual. Things, creating a ripple effect of resilience in entire communities. Rising after a fall also strengthens character in ways that comfort never could. Things, when everything goes smoothly, there is little reason to grow. But when life knocks you down, the process of getting up builds perseverance, humility, and wisdom. Things. Nick often speaks about how his hardships gave him a depth of gratitude and compassion that he might never have developed otherwise. Things. His courage to rise after failure did not just make him stronger, it made him more empathetic, more authentic. Things, and more capable of connecting with others. Falling refines character and rising polishes it. Things, creating individuals who are not only resilient but also deeply human in their ability to understand and uplift others. Things. Courage is the alchemy that turns the bitterness of failure into the gold of character. Finally, things. The courage to rise after every fall transforms fear into confidence. The more times you rise, the less intimidating falling becomes. Things. Nick discovered that the fear of falling was often worse than the fall itself. Once he realized he had the strength to rise, things. He no longer feared failure in the same way. This liberated him to take risks, to step onto stages, to pursue relationships, and to live boldly. Things. Courage creates a cycle. Each rise builds confidence, and each confidence fuels more courage, enabling greater rises in the future. Over time, things, what once seemed impossible becomes attainable. Things, not because the falls disappear, but because the courage to rise has become stronger than the fear of falling.